So, how's it going? I want to take one quick minute to take you through everything behind me on the board so that you can understand where my mindset is at today so that hopefully you can make some better decisions down the road. Let's start off with the truth. The bloodlines that rule this world have created private banks, which eventually led to the Federal Reserve, which created the World Bank and obviously the Bank of International Standards, from which, through the Financial Stability Board, they are creating the IMF, which helps them rank and create the new World Bank, and quote unquote, that determines how finances go all over the world by rating these places as G7, G20 countries or third world countries that basically get a certain percentage of these special drawing rights. Now, what are special drawing rights? Well, special drawing rights are basically, due to the size of these countries, it's the amount of wealth that gets distributed across the world in quote unquote any of the accepted currencies in a basket. Now, these currencies in a basket, kind of like the US dollar, are just currency units. But these currency units are traded by unallocated metals. They're not traded in these banks by allocated metals. They're not backed by a real asset. So what that does is that it basically changes the regulations and the laws which these bloodlines created. So these bloodlines create these laws and regulations and then manipulate them in order to get access to capital. When they do that, they can change whatever country it is that they want to go ahead and access capital from, because these are just currency units. Because now we are printing money without control because it's unlimited. This means that the world resources are being really derived from a fake value. And so this makes trade management really, really hard, because now, as you can see, the shipping industry is suffering, which is why it's causing so much of a trouble in our current financial system infrastructure. This is why we're going on to the QFS. The QFS, as you may understand it as the quantum financial system, is going to give us back the value of any asset or resource or commodity. And the point here is that anything should be of value depending on who it is that you're trading with. Because when you trade, barter, or exchange things, it's really upon the agreed or the agreement made between these two parties, not the third intermediary party, which is the US dollar in this case, or the Federal Reserve. But if you remember back in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, this was done in order to be able to go ahead and bring this control of the quote-unquote petrodollar back to the US. Now, the petrodollar was made in the agreement that all of oil and petroleum would be exchanged in US dollars to all countries around the world. Well, you see, what happened was that China was not going to stand for it, so they created the One Belt, One Road opportunity for the world, and the infrastructure that is now trading under the digital yuan. Going back to the digital yuan, it is now backed by gold, because the digital yuan has been the innovation of the Chinese economy, which has been developing for the past 4,000 to 5,000 years, versus the US economy that's been developing for 300 years. So I want you to ask yourself a question. Are we innovating, or are we really just trying to keep up? Are we taking their power away and they're just trying to go ahead and step back into the role? Or are we just lying to ourselves because we're imposters? You see, the US is trying to figure out how to keep control of everything. Why? Because the US was created from these bloodlines that created these private banks to operate the new world through the Federal Reserve. But what's happening now is that as the International Monetary Fund is seeing that Bitcoin is having this introduction of a new monetary system to the world, well, what they've done without telling you is that they created what is called the ISO 222 regulation standards back in around 2014 in order to improve the speed of transactions and settlements of cross-border transactions around the world, because they are moving money not through a banking institution network of money. This used to be called SWIFT, but now what they're choosing to do is they're moving money on the blockchain at a fraction of the cost at instant speeds. And these are called ISO 222 regulated tokens, which are meant to advance the speed and reduce the friction and the cost of all transactions worldwide. Meaning, the shipping industry has to change, meaning Trade and commodities have to change, meaning regulations have to change, meaning everything has to change. So what's going on now is that we are being thrown with all this information about cryptocurrencies because the bloodlines are losing control of private banks, because private individuals like you and I are finally able to step into a role. If we do our research, we can capitalize on these opportunities at a low cost. And that's what I'm here to speak to you about. Because the more that you can learn about how this entire quantum financial system works, the better you can position yourself for the future. Because we are here to change the way the entire global financial system has been built. And if you're watching this, I thank you, but it's time to pay attention. Because there's so many issues bigger than what I've just described. Because as we keep going up the chart, we want to take a look at the SDR reasoning for this, right? Because it is all about the debt to GDP that each country has, aka its standing in the world, going back to the Financial Stability Board. Because the debt to GDP ratio of each country affects its position in its SDR allocation. Now you may be wondering, what the fuck does that mean? Well, pay attention to this, because SDRs are going to be electronically pegged to what's called ICP. And ICP is going to be the new internet of a centralized quantum financial system. Now, this is just as simple as it can get. We have two things. We have a centralized or a decentralized. Now, people don't really understand what this means, because centralized means that it's ran by a private party which keeps control of everything and is able to oversee all transactions and monetary policies. Because what these guys do, hence, this is kind of like what we're trying to create if the IMF is trying to create a system, hence ICP. But remember, ICP is the AI supercomputer for the internet. It is not the blockchain. And so what has to happen is that there has to be a blockchain connected to the AI internet or the supercomputer so that it can read the information. This is the notebook. This is the consciousness reading the notebook. You need to understand that everything that is going on right here is to bring us away from what is called a decentralized autonomous organization. The entire business model for the last few hundred years has been for the shareholders, meaning for the profit, not for humanity. And that's what I'm here to speak on, because we're changing everything around, guys. If you're watching this, that means you're excited for a brand new future, and you're excited to see what is going to happen with these crypto technologies. Well, you need to understand that all of these cryptocurrencies or crypto technologies or blockchain technologies, they're all meant to drive us towards a decentralized autonomous organization. That is what they're afraid of. See, when a computer protocol runs the entire organization and the financial system is not controlled by a person who can be controlled by emotions or greed, but it's controlled by an algorithm that is establishing certain rules, parameters, and obviously these rites of passage that you must go through before earning trust in the ecosystem, well, it changes everything because it's a level playing field. We want to go back to this because you need to understand what it means at its most core concept. It means a decentralized autonomous organization is controlling the entire infrastructure while there are developers and investors and businesses and community members voting on the direction of this. Because as a community, we're supposed to go ahead and have a percentage debate. Basically meaning, hey, I voted, meaning if there's 10,000 people in the community and 10,000 people vote, great, it's an equal, fair vote. Now, what we don't want is we don't want there to be 10,000 people and there's 10,002 votes. And that's what this is going to prevent. Let's go all the way back to this previous election. Voting has been the issue, right? Your voice being heard has been the issue. So these decentralized autonomous organizations will give you the chance or the opportunity to speak your voice, speak your truth, and be heard and legitimately tracked, because that's what's important. That your voice is heard because everybody matters. That's all that is important right now. We are here for humanity, and we need to make sure that for humanity to have a fair financial system from which we operate at a global trading level, we need to understand that there must be a collateral agreed upon by the private banks, which is why everything is collapsing right now. Because since Basel III began being implemented, then what happened is that all private banks, if they wanted to do trading in the markets, they could not have unallocated metals. They had to have metals of at least 80 to 85% within their vaults if it is that they wanted to go ahead and enter the markets to trade, let alone if they wanted to provide access to capital. This is a whole new layer now, right? Because before, these private banks were giving out loans without being actually backed by anything. And this is where the 2008 collapse happens, right? Because the real estate market in the United States, what it was doing, it was taking some shitty ass practices and applying them to be able to fake, quote unquote, create fake loans or fake collateral out of these like super shitty deals. They condense them to make them look pretty into a type A deal, and then they try to sell them off to those people in a way that it presented itself to be a good opportunity, but really they were pulling the rug on everybody. And that's what's going on right now again with Tether and Bitcoin. And most people don't even see it coming. Personally, I don't own any Bitcoin. I don't want to get in the mess of it. I don't believe that I'll be able to go ahead and get involved because I don't want to deal with the headache or the emotional stress. So what I've done instead, going back to what is a centralized versus decentralized ecosystem, is that I had to do my research, because out of these ISO 222 regulated tokens, there are six in the entire ecospace out of the 12,000 coins. So think about it like this. You have 12,000 cryptos, and out of these, only 6 are going to be regulated. That's the game. You need to understand what is in a game of what isn't. And when you realize that these 6 coins have been created to move value, doesn't matter what kind of value, it could be a worldwide resource, it could be a derivative, or it could be a shipping container. It does not matter. And remember, the problem here is the tracking issue of the shipping containers right now. This is why the entire world trade is collapsing right now, because there's not enough wine bottles, there's issues with paper towels, there's issue with food, there's going to be issues everywhere. And if you're not prepared, this is why it's happening. Because boats, because shipping containers, all these things are being affected due to the way that money is being moved around the world. More importantly, we are having the situation in the Eastern China Sea in which the petrodollar and the digital yuan are having funk. That's right, they're having funk. Why? Because the digital yuan is backed by something. The petrodollar was forced into something. Because remember, after 9/11, what happened was 9/11 led to the destruction of the files and the paperwork of all the trade and finances of these illegal practices. So what 9/11 did is it gave birth to Bitcoin because of the blockchain, so that way there could be transmutable transactions or permanent transactions. So when blockchain was created, now we have another source of quote unquote access to money. Because if you remember, the Federal Reserve was being brought down. That means that there is an awareness that this is a fake system that we shouldn't partake in. And most countries, aka China and Russia, those that understand what is going on, that there is a lot of trading of unallocated metals, meaning that this is money backed by absolutely nothing but digitals, ones and zeros. Because we have Bitcoin and we have what's called the credit or the debt dollar. And so now this credit or debt dollar is what gives birth to the credit score, which is why China has been implementing the social credit score for the past few years, testing out their new system, aka the digital yuan, so that the credit score and the digital yuan are pegged together, because they understand that for you to get access to capital, it's all about your opportunity to impact society for the betterment of society. You need to understand that if you don't learn how to leverage the technology today, you will be less susceptible to what's called a social credit score number in order to get access to capital, because that's what's going on with the centralized ecosystem. You need to understand that this is going to run on access to capital based upon your trust score, trust number. And how is your trust number being built? Well, they're going to see your transactions on the blockchain based upon the AI internet, and they're going to rate them either positive or negative and give you minus points or plus points. And if you go ahead and cross the street at the wrong time, facial recognition will be able to track you and deduct points, lowering your credit score, giving you less access to capital. And this is why they're trying to put you into the Bitcoin network, because the Bitcoin network is quote unquote what is being managed by these individuals that are currently overlooking the entire transaction models of the current financial system, and they're going to monitor the new Bitcoin financial system. You're probably wondering, why is he saying all that? Well, let's take a look at who created it, right? Well, the idea that David Schwartz, the creator of the XRP ledger, was the same guy that was part of the group, Satoshi Nakamoto, that created Bitcoin, because it was a group and an individual, right? There's like a mastermind surrounded by a bunch of people. One person alone can do it, hence David is a genius. And so now, plus he's Jewish, and then you want to go ahead and think about it as, what could the other side of the coin be? Is that the only man working to improve global trade and economy? No, there's many people out there, and many of those are working to create what's called a decentralized financial system, where those that understand what is going on can go ahead and position themselves in the right place to be of value to the new decentralized ecosystem. That means a decentralized internet and a decentralized financial system. And if you can position yourself in those guys, then guess what? You're going to be free from what is called those responsibilities, requirements, and obviously whatever demands they have placed on access to capital. Yes, regulations will play a part, but if you become somebody that's just like aware of how things are going, you could choose to become owner of digital real estate on the blockchain. Digital real estate on the blockchain is basically you are buying what are called tokens to create what are called nodes, to create what are called opportunities for these ecosystems that are being ran on decentralized blockchains to operate. Now, what is a decentralized blockchain? Well, we want to think of blockchains like R3 Corda. That's a really easy one to talk about because it's one of the most major influential players in the game right now, which is working with Zinfin, which have what's called the XDC token. XDC is the way out of the financial system, even though it has the interoperability to enter the centralized financial system, because it operates under what's called the ILP, which is the interledger protocol of the decentralized internet, and it is also part of distributed ledger technology, which is part of what is creating the ISO, which is worldwide liquidity for value and wealth. So ISO, it doesn't matter, as long as it's one of these six, it can operate under either of these two. Now, it's your goal as an individual who's becoming knowledgeable to understand, do I want to be part of the centralized system or do I want to be part of the decentralized system? Now, I'm not saying you should just choose one. I think you should choose both. And I think you should make a smart decision about where you put your money. Because if you don't have a bag of XDC, and if you don't have a bag of XRP or XLM, then remember that you're making yourself susceptible in this transition to being vulnerable. And you don't want to be vulnerable, especially financially vulnerable, because of lack of financial education. So this quick video was meant to give you an overview of what is going on. It's not everything, but as you can see, I'm very passionate about all of these things, because in order for you to get access to money, to be able to launch your business, or to be able to achieve your dream, these things, A or B, require access to capital. Now, unless you are a farmer growing your own crops, I don't know what to tell you. Those guys, they are creating their own value. And this is the importance of being able to grow your own crops. Remember, guys, as we transition into this new world, you need to make sure you educate yourselves on the basics of how the current financial system has been brought up. You teach yourself how to create your own food. You teach yourself how the body works and how to create your own meal plan so you can leverage the food that you create to feed yourself, to not depend on calories, but understand nutrients. And more importantly, you need to understand how to get access to capital over the next few years, because in this new economy, you cannot get access to capital just based upon credit score. You're also going to have a digital asset that you can leverage for collateral. This is collaterals, guys. Collateral means that you have property that you can leverage instead of having to use your trust number. You just say, hey, I have this, I'll give you this if you give me that. That still provides access to capital. But if you're going to rely on going to the new banks or the new Federal Reserve institutions that are being created to house blockchain technology, well, then what's going to happen is you're going to depend on a trust number if you have no digital asset collateral, which is why it's important that you pay attention to the evolution of how we are transporting our current trade and commerce economy. And so that way you don't get lost behind as many of these countries go under debt, because the more debt, it means that the less of their position. But really, what is it? Debt is only a way to play the game, right? So it's not even based upon debt. You have to start looking at which of these countries are being positioned or rearranged, because every 5 years, there is a new percentage of allocations being given out. And we are going to be seeing some cryptos, I'm not going to say which ones, cryptos are going to be added into the allocation or the basket of currencies, so that way they can be a blend between the old system and the new system, in my opinion. You know, this is just in my opinion, not financial advice. But the entire thing that you see going on here is a mess. So that's why we have to make sure you pay attention to what it is that you're doing today, so that in the future you can guarantee access to capital, so that in the future you can be part of a decentralized or centralized financial system. But more importantly, we are moving towards a world of decentralized autonomous organizations. Decentralized autonomous organizations will rule the world, and this will make it fair for humanity. And so that's where we're going with this, because that's what I'm building. All right? And the reason I'm saying all these things is because I want to play a fair, level game where nobody has more authority or empowerment over others. We are all equals, guys. Let's learn to play the game for what it is. All right? Take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of your family, and I promise everything will work out. We'll catch you on the next one.